Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
September 8th was proclaimed International Literacy Day by UNESCO back in 1965. And 50 years later, there are still some 775 million adults who lack minimum literacy skills, with 1 in 5 adults still not literate. 2/3 of those are women. In addition to this, 60 million children are out of school and many more attend irregularly or even drop out. Hello and welcome to Invest Africa. I'm Nozipho Mbanja, and today we're looking at the strategies that have and can be put in place to encourage a literate global population. In studio with me to help me unpack some of these issues is Ishmael Kungwane. He is a Senior Client Liaison Officer at Project Literacy, and Maynard. She's a teacher and coordinator at the Link Literacy Project. For you at home, if you want to be a part of this conversation, all you need to do is, of course, participate on Twitter. The hashtag is Invest Africa. Follow me at CNBC Africa. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. Ishmael, let's get the lay of the land first. Are you able to give us some basic generic trends around literacy and illiteracy in South Africa?
Yeah, the report, the Statistics SA report says that we have about 84% functionally illiterate adults, and then 7% are completely illiterate.
What is the difference between functionally literate versus completely illiterate?
Functionally illiterate, it means they have gone to school, let's say, for about 7 years of schooling. So there's something that they can do. They can read, they can write, they can do other things, basic things. And then completely illiterate, it means they have never even been into a class and they don't know how to read, neither to write. But they continue with their basic household chores, and some of them are working, are employed, they can do certain things in the workplace, like cleaning, for example, and all that other stuff.
Megan, 84% sounds like an awfully big number to have a partially or functionally illiterate population. How does this stack up against the continent or even globally or other emerging markets?
Well, apparently we're second highest in Africa as far as literacy figures go. But I find this quite surprising. And in terms of what I've seen, I still feel that we actually have a huge problem here. With a lot of our children, we ask them, and how many books do you have at home? And the answer often is none. They just don't come from a culture of reading. And literacy is a huge problem, and I think that's why both of us are in this game, because actually there is a huge need out there.
And I guess the question then becomes, so why does it matter? And this is where we're looking for that economic link. Why is it important to have a literate population, Ishmael?
We need to have a literate population because, one, we are a global community. So for global competitiveness, we need to have adults and young adults or the youth who are able to compete with the others in the globe. And to compete, you need to be literate and numerate. And to take it further, you need to have certain skills, like we need scientists, we need engineers, we need all these kind of things. So if we don't have that, then we'll have a problem with our adults, and they can be ripped off their well-earned money because of scams and people who can come and take their hard-earned money that they
because they
for
just
so
don't
many
really
years.
understand the numeracy and the literacy behind that. But Megan, both you and Ishmael have been in the space for a while. What is your sense in terms of the progress? Are we moving in the right direction? Could we potentially be talking about a smaller percentage in future years of South Africans that are illiterate?
Well, I hope so. I think we're both trying to, with our organizations, and can I say we're not the only organizations. There are many out there who are actually trying to make a difference. And
let's talk a little bit about linked literacy, because that's where you are.
Yes.
Give us a sense about what you're bringing to market and what's the difference and the value add that you're trying to put on the table.
Okay. Well, what the link is, it supports the development of reading and maths in children for whom English is a second language, and they attend underprivileged schools. So how we run it, which is very different to the other organisation, is we focus entirely on children. We use volunteers to come in and work with the children one-on-one or two-on-one. So this makes a huge difference in terms of big classrooms where you have 56 in a classroom. We now have one child to one facilitator, and they can really help them.
I want to bring Ishmael in, but a quick question. I mean, you raised the issue around you using volunteers, yes. And it obviously raises alarm bells for me around the funding models and whether this is a policy priority. To what extent have you found it difficult to attract funds to do your work?
It is quite difficult, but somehow when people actually see the project, they are so enthused with it.
Yeah.
And we have measurable outcomes because we assess the children at the beginning of the year and then we reassess them at the end, and the results are really phenomenal. They make huge improvements, and I'm completely aware that our project isn't the only thing influencing the improvement, but I think it substantially contributes to it. And so when you've got something substantial like that, an outcome that they improve by 25% across the board, then people are willing to come and help. And the beauty of our project is that once they're actually once we have a school up and running, it doesn't actually need an awful lot more funding. It's fairly self-sufficient. Every year we might need more books, more stationery, but essentially it's up and running.
Let's bring project literacy in. And again, I think there might be a differentiator in terms of what you're doing in the market. And I'm going to come back, Megan, to talk about the language issue and whether indigenous languages fit into that broader model. But what does project literacy do?
Our priority is to give educational programs to previously disadvantaged communities, adults and children included. And but however, we work with non-governmental organizations, we work with government departments, we work with private institutions or corporates, so that we can sustain ourselves, because with ours it's not a voluntary basis. We do have educators who educate adult learners. We do have reading champions who have to empower parents to read to children, and for that we need funding.
So Ishmael, maybe give us some insight around the various challenges that one as an organization would have to deal with, dealing with child literacy versus when you're dealing with what I would assume is a different animal altogether when you're looking at adult literacy. What are the nuances between the two?
With child literacy, basically we ask for funding from donors to fund those projects. And then we normally get books, buy books, or from our publishers, they publish those books. And we publish them in basically in English, but sometimes we are forced to translate those books into different indigenous languages.
Right.
Based on the research that we will do in that particular community. And we find that caregivers or most of the adults cannot read and write, or they can only read and write in their mother tongue. Then we have to take those books and then they have to read them. And basically those are the children who are in early childhood development centers.
Absolutely.
And we encourage the culture of reading there.
And there's a lot of policy support for early childhood development.
Yes.
What about adult literacy?
No, adult literacy it's there in the constitution of this country that people need to get adult basic education. However, the way it is coordinated by people in corporates and governments and all those things, it's not taken that much seriously. Because, let me give you an example. Because of infrastructure problem, because we use the resources available. If we have to go to a corporate and then we have to facilitate to the employees there, we need to get a room there. And then you'll find that sometimes we are given a boardroom because it's not being used. But when there is a board meeting, then there is no class. for that particular day. And sometimes they tell you in the morning, the educator is there, the learners are there, and then they said, no, there is a board meeting, which will take the whole day.
So there's not as much buy-in from all the stakeholders to focus on adult literacy as against child literacy.
Yeah.
Let's take a short break, because I think this conversation is heating up, and it's really, really opening some really important insights around how South African government, the private sector and other stakeholders view literacy in this country and where they see priority areas in terms of moving forward. When we come back from the break, we're going to pick up on those points and much, much more. See you in a bit. Welcome back to Invest Africa. Thank you for staying with us. And still with me in studio, Ishmael Kungwane is a Senior Client Liaison Officer at Project Literacy, and Maynard, Teacher and Coordinator at the Link Literacy Project. Now, before we went to break, we are really beginning to understand the different complexities around child and adult literacy. Megan, in your view, what should be done to help us accelerate the progress towards achieving universal literacy in this country, and who should be doing what?
That's quite a difficult question. I don't think we should put the onus on any one particular group. I think we all need to work towards this. I think each individual can do something in their own way. Sure, the government needs to help, and it is a very important priority. But there are things that can be done. One of the things that I thought about was possibly twinning a more privileged school, possibly with a less privileged school. They may have the facilities, and they could possibly help in terms of teaching and working with the children in the afternoons, offering their facilities. That is one possibility.
Why hasn't that idea taken off? I mean, I've been covering the education space for quite a while, and this idea of twinning schools in South Africa as a way of sharing resources and infrastructure, but as well as healing some sort of social divisions, has always been there. But for some reason, it seems as if we keep making this suggestion. Is it actually happening, or is there a resistance to this kind of partnership?
I think it is happening. I think if you look around, you'll find quite a lot of schools. They offer their sports fields in the afternoon. They might offer their computer labs. There are children who do community service, who certainly come and help with our project. So I think it is happening. I think it needs to happen on a broader scale.
And would you go as far as saying that we need a policy to mandate this kind of thing? Or is it okay that it happens on an ad hoc basis?
I think the government has introduced this community service aspect, which I think is hugely important. And apart from schools doing work with underprivileged people, I think businesses are also coming on board and doing this now. And we actually have a number of businesses who've bought into our concept and who are giving up time during the day to allow their employees to come and help. So I think there are many ways one can assist.
I want to bring in business again, and Ishmael, and get a sense from you what you think can be done. I understand that there might be shared resources in terms of the use of infrastructure, and as Megan says, even through CSI programs allowing employees to participate. Is it enough? If we're saying that this is one of the key things that differentiates us in the global market in terms of our competitiveness, is what the private sector is putting on the table enough?
It's not enough. The private sector, besides giving the infrastructure, we can have libraries in the workplace. And to have libraries in the workplace is just to get a room, have some shelves, and a computer, and somebody sits there and then take care of those books, and then and then it can have hours in terms of they can regulate to say the library can be open between 9 and 10 every day.
But is that library accessible? If you're looking at who's actually illiterate, and let's just take a hypothetical company in the Sandton CBD, who's going to be accessing those books? Who's going to be reading in there?
Can I actually just come in here? Because I know of an exact example of this. Business donated a wonderful library, and the doors are locked and it's not being used because there isn't a qualified librarian and nobody actually knows how to use it. So it's no good just giving things without the proper support
around it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an important point, but let me put government aside, let's put the private sector aside. At an organizational level, because obviously donors are looking, like you said, Megan, they want outcomes-based interventions. What more can non-profit organizations and any other entities that are playing in the space do to make sure that the return on investing in literacy is tangible?
What we normally do as an NGO ourselves when we get donor funding, some of the money is set aside, and then we can even have container libraries that we take into communities wherever we will be working there. And the whole community there can have access to that particular library, and then they can start to understand the library, because in most cases, especially remote and rural areas, you might find that there's no library around there, and the people need to read and write. So if we take a container library and put it in that particular community, and we employ somebody as a librarian to take care of those books, then it will be worth an investment in that particular community.
So innovation and thinking about things in an innovative way might be a way of increasing the return of investment. True. Megan, what else can be done at an organizational level?
Well, donations can certainly be made, and I think another thing possibly is maybe one needs to work together more. There are quite a few organizations out there, and we're all on our own little missions, and possibly there needs to be a little more dialogue so that we can make sure we're all streamlining things and doing things properly.
So streamlining, but also it's a question of strength in numbers,
exactly,
where we could really begin to increase impact. I promised that I was going to address this issue, so let me start it off with you, Ishmael. Language, when it comes to literacy, has there been sufficient attention paid to in which language are we trying to get people to learn to read and to write? And does it matter whether it's an indigenous language or is it in English, as an example?
It really matters, because the corporates and some government institutions, they want the language of economics being offered to people. But we are saying as an NGO to say we need to educate people first in their own mother tongue. And then we can translate and take whatever. Because let me give you an example. I can write a letter in my own mother tongue. The format will be the same. Now, if I have to write that letter in English, it's just, I have the format of a letter. I know that it must have an address, the salutation, and then 3 paragraphs, and then a conclusion. That won't change. And even the content, I can change the content from my mother tongue letter into the language of economics, which is English, which needs to be done. But we need to empower these people first in their mother tongue. Then once that has been done, then we can start talking about another language. However, because it takes a while, it takes a lot of time, because companies and government departments don't want to contribute the time, because normally they'll give them 1 hour a day, Monday to Thursday, which is 4 hours a week to do that. And it might take them for level 1 the whole 6 months or the whole year, and then level 2 it goes the whole year again next year. Then it means that's when the person starts to do English and numeracy now. So for that, people want to see these people already doing it in English, and then some of them, they even go to an extent that even if you don't understand, you don't know your mother tongue, you don't know how to read and write in your mother tongue. It doesn't matter. They want computer-based learning or e-learning, because they want to send emails to a fellow a person who's making tea or who is cleaning in the office using a sophisticated equipments that those people can't even use. You get my point?
So, unfortunately, we've come to the end of this conversation and the end of the show, but some really, really interesting things, in fact, coming out of this last discussion around language and also who's actually controlling the literacy agenda. Is it for those who are illiterate, or is it to meet business needs? And of course, if you follow the money trail, that's possibly where you get the answers. A very big thank you to Ishmael Kungwane. He's a Senior Client Liaison Officer at Project Literacy, and Maynard, Teacher and Coordinator at the Link Literacy Project. Of course, if you'd like to take this conversation further, you can certainly do that. That's by tweeting us. The hashtag is Invest Africa, following us at CNBC Africa. For me and the Invest Africa team, it's goodbye.
Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.